Thank you for taking part in this session. My name is Bud Pugh, and I will be presenting with Jen Samble. We both serve on the Bylaw 11, 13, 17 team. Today, we will be walking through various topics that we've worked on this year with the membership related to Bylaw 11 personnel. The agenda item for this session are, first, coaching limits. We will talk through the items that impact a sport program's coaching limit. Second, we will discuss factors that may impact replacements due to extenuating circumstances. And third, we'll spend time discussing managers. Several case studies will be reviewed to guide our conversation. Please feel free to pause at an appropriate time to give yourself a chance to analyze each scenario. This is a recap of the definition of accountable coach. 1, the individual provides technical, tactical instruction to student athletes. What is technical, tactical instruction? Direction or teaching that relates to any sports-related technique. Tactical instruction occurs when an individual provides direction or teaches a student athlete regarding a strategy, maneuver, play, or scheme, or the like. 2, the individual makes tactical decisions. A conclusion, determination, or judgment related to a strategy, maneuver, play, scheme, or the like. And 3, off-campus recruiting. Each sport has a limit on the number of accountable coaches who may engage in technical or tactical instruction, make game time decisions, or engage in recruiting. For example, baseball and softball permit 3 accountable coaches, football at 10 or 11 based on FBS or FCS. There are a few other individuals that may be involved with sports who do not count towards coaching limits, but would still fit into a coaching category. As you consider the definition of a coaching staff member, who else may provide technical or tactical instruction or make tactical decisions related to the sport? A student coach would fit into this category. Graduate assistant coaches in football, swimming and diving, rowing. And lastly, volunteer coach. Individuals designated into these positions may provide technical or tactical instruction. Individuals designated into a coaching category must either be accountable coach or meet an exception to the coaching category. One additional exception would be for weight or strength coaches who may conduct only flexibility, warm-up, and physical conditioning activities. All other individuals outside of these categories would be considered non-coaching staff members. Based on a staff interpretation from May 13, 1992, a person designated into a coaching category assumes the position throughout the duration of the academic year, which includes summer months concluding on July 31. The only way an individual designated in a coaching category may be removed and replaced is either when the individual resigns from their role with the institution or utilizes the temporary replacement legislation. Enter our first case study. The institution's baseball program is requesting for 2 individuals to throw batting practice throughout the academic year. Due to the volume of throwing and risk of injury, they anticipate needing no more than 2 individuals to fill this role. The institution believes this will be a taxing role and wants to make sure they have fresh arms to throw batting practice throughout the year. May the institution alternate designating 2 individuals as a volunteer coach throughout the year? Based on these facts, the institution would not be able to do this. The volunteer coach falls into a coaching category, so the institution would not be able to swap a volunteer out of their position. Volunteer coach would either need to resign from the role or be replaced through application of the replacement due to extenuating circumstances legislation. And that segues into our replacement due to extenuating circumstances topic. This is an area staff has received several questions from the membership when it comes to applying this legislation. Breaking down the parts, part 1, on a temporary or limited basis, an institution may replace temporarily or on a limited basis one of its accountable coaches. What does this mean? Temporary or limited is reviewed on a single occurrence happening within an academic year. Beyond that, it is not considered temporary or limited. Part 2. Extenuating circumstance. An institution can replace a coach due to extenuating circumstances. What does that mean? Institutions must conduct an analysis to use local decision-making in applying the legislation. To give some context on what staff typically sees from an interpretive standpoint, it would be reasonable to consider a coach dealing with a medical condition or pregnancy, or even some sort of family obligation. For example, a coach participating in an immediate family member's wedding. Institutions are encouraged to evaluate the scenario to determine if the circumstances are extenuating when applying this legislation on campus. And lastly, duties. An institution may replace a coach if the coach is unable to perform one or more of their duties. The key being, the replaced coach may only perform the duties the accountable coach is unable to perform. What does that mean? You've got a head coach that is pregnant and has been placed on medical-related travel restrictions, which will prohibit her from taking a flight to recruit out of state. Well, the replacement is only permitted to perform the recruiting duties the head coach is unable to perform herself. In addition, there's a timing aspect to the replacement that needs to be considered so that you're not creating a scenario where the coaching limits are being exceeded beyond this exception. And we'll talk more about this later. Our first temporary replacement case study, the fact scenario. The director of baseball operations has temporarily replaced a head coach to take on responsibility of pitching batting practice. Through the years, the head coach typically throws batting practice. Well, now the head coach had to have rotator cuff surgery and is unable to throw batting practice. No other coaches are available to throw batting practice. The institution designates the director of baseball operations as a replacement to throw batting practice in place of the head coach. The question, is it permissible for the head coach to lead another drill on the field while the director of operations is participating in batting practice activities? The head coach feels like he can still be engaged in practice, giving verbal instructions, running another drill where he doesn't have to do anything physically. The guidance that has been provided is no. This is an example of duplication of duties, which the legislation does not permit. Sure, the director of baseball operations is only throwing batting practice, but understand that throwing batting practice is participating in practice and would be considered a coaching activity. So at that point in time, the director of baseball operations is throwing batting practice. The staff is at their max in coaching limits. The head coach cannot simultaneously go somewhere else and participate in coaching activities. The director of soccer operations has temporarily replaced the head soccer coach for a recruiting trip. Like the last example, your institution has a coach that is being replaced for an extenuating circumstance and cannot travel to recruit on behalf of the institution. The replacement is away engaging in recruiting activities per the legislation. Coach returns to campus and wants to engage in practice activities. Question, is it permissible for the head coach to run practice on campus while the director of soccer operations is out recruiting? No. The accountable coach may not conduct skills-related instruction while the replacement coach is engaged in recruiting activities, as it will result in exceeding your coaching limits. Although the accountable coach and temporary replacement coach are not performing the same duties, they still may not engage in accountable coach activities at the same time, as this will result in the sport exceeding the coaching limits. Duplication of coaching duties is generally a tough concept. Evaluating the timing of the coach and replacement coach performing the activity is essential. The burden relies on the athletic staff and the compliance office to demonstrate that the replaced coach and accountable coach are not performing duties at the same moment in time. Finally, contemplate whether the scenario truly necessitates the replacement. May the ice hockey team's director of player personnel temporarily replace the assistant women's ice hockey coach due to the ice hockey coach's health issues. They've incurred a setback in their knee injury rehab that prevents her from conducting active drills with players. Again, another example, coaches incur some sort of long-term injury. The coach may be replaced, and it is reasonable for the replacement to last the duration of the academic year or the season of competition. But what if the condition carries on into the next year? Yes, the individual may be replaced for an extended period of time during the academic year. Key component with this and any of the cases we discussed is the duration. As referenced earlier, if it is necessary to replace beyond a temporary period, you should consider some other options if ongoing replacement is necessary. So let's rewind back to any of the scenarios we've discussed. Going into the next academic year, the coach's conditions have not improved, and the coach remains unable to participate in practice or engage in some other coaching duty, and coach is requesting a replacement for the new academic year. This is a point where staff must consider alternative options, because the replacement legislation is intended to be a temporary accommodation, not a permanent ongoing solution. Things to keep in mind with regards to discussion and considering next steps. Is there another coaching staff member that can perform a coaching duty, or a student athlete who may permissibly facilitate a practice drill? Or is there another method of fulfilling what you need on a more permanent basis? Each of these must be contemplated before considering a waiver of this legislation. And that concludes the replacement due to extenuating circumstances topic.
Thank you, Bud. We're going to now turn to the topic of managers, who they are, what they can and cannot do, and spend some time working through some case scenarios of commonly asked questions in this space. Managers perform traditional managerial duties: equipment, laundry. Managers are full-time graduate or undergraduate students at the institution. Managers may participate in limited on-court or on-field activities during practice and competition, such as throwing batting practice and shagging fly balls. Managers may not provide technical or tactical instruction to student athletes. Managers may not participate in CARA. And in baseball, a student that serves as a manager forfeits any remaining eligibility in that sport at the institution. Let's now move on to some case studies. May a manager be a full-time student at an institution other than the one at which he or she is serving as a manager? No, a manager must be a full-time student at the institution at which he or she is serving as a manager. In June of 2019, the Interpretations Committee clarified that a manager must be enrolled full-time at the same institution at which he or she is serving as a manager. May a male practice player for the women's basketball team serve as a manager for the men's basketball team? No, it is not permissible for a male practice player in the sport of women's basketball to serve simultaneously as a manager for the men's basketball team. The main point here is that an individual may not wear both hats at the same time. Is a male practice player in the sport of women's volleyball allowed to assist in pregame warm-ups, sit on the bench at home games, and keep stats and take film? Essentially, is a male practice player then allowed to serve as a manager for that same sport? No, it is not permissible for a male practice player to serve simultaneously as a manager or complete managerial duties, such as assisting in pregame warm-ups, sitting on the bench, and keeping statistics. Because a manager may participate in limited on-court and on-field activities, provided he or she also performs traditional managerial duties, the manager may not simultaneously be a male practice player. Again, there's a choice, one hat or the other. Can a graduate manager who is also a former student athlete participate in practice on an occasional basis? So which of these two positions supersede each other? In this case, the former student athlete's role as a manager would not allow this, as it supersedes the former student athlete legislation. The manager may certainly participate in limited on-court or on-field activities, as long as the manager is not acting in the capacity of a practice player or providing tactical or technical instruction to the student athletes participating in the activity. Again, if an individual is serving as a manager, they cannot then serve as a practice player. They have to have one hat or the other. May an institution's graduate student manager in softball provide private lessons to prospective student athletes? Understanding that managers may wish to receive some outside compensation and coaches may want to help them assist with that, can they provide practice and can they provide private lessons to prospective student athlete aged individuals? No. Per Bylaw 1311.36, only women's golf and equestrian coaches may provide private lessons to prospective student athletes in their respective sports. Managers and other department staff members are not permitted to provide private lessons. Where there is some flexibility is if these individuals, including managers, are able to participate in the local sports club that follows the local sports club legislation, 1311-24. Is it local? Are all the members residing within the proper radius of the institution? That's where flexibility may be granted. May an institution employ a student as a men's basketball student manager if that student currently serves as a coach for a high school team in the same sport? And vice versa. Can the manager then seek employment as a high school coach for a boys basketball team? Yes, it would be permissible for a men's basketball manager to serve as a high school coach, provided he does not engage in recruiting activities, such as conducting evaluations for the institution's coaching staff, engaging in recruiting conversations on behalf of the institution, or reporting back to an institution's coaching staff while serving in that capacity. The intent here is to permit the manager to gain coaching experience and earn extra income as a high school coach, not to recruit on behalf of the institution. You may want to consider having education for managers that asks if they are offered or are seeking employment at a high school or local sports club, that it must be reported to and cleared first by the compliance office. One other important thing to note, if the institution later decides to recruit any of the players on that manager's high school boys basketball team, the institution would want to conduct an analysis to determine if the manager triggered IAWP status and what the implications of that would be. Thank you again for spending some time addressing personnel matters with us. We would really appreciate your feedback as staff continues to find ways to educate the membership.